things rolling and get to some SEC win totals. All odds brought to you by ESPN Bet. Now, we'll be doing this all week long, hitting on the teams that speak each day. And before we get started for today's picks, let's take a look at Greg's picks from yesterday. He has LSU going under the 9.5, and the Tigers went under that total last season. He's taken the over on Ole Miss, South Carolina, and Vandy. Excluding 2020, Vandy has gone under its regular season win total in 3 of the last 4 seasons. Okay, Greg, let's start with the newbie to the SEC, Oklahoma, over under 7.5 wins.
I was kind of hoping you'd burn the pick so I could change them the next time we did them. Then I have it on both sides of the coin. In this particular, I'll do with Oklahoma. I'm going over. I know a lot of people are having a hard time seeing them being competitive with this roster right now in the SEC. I disagree. I think they could make a pretty strong case to have a top 3 defense in the league. I think the offensive line's the big question mark, and all they have to be, Jordan, is, I think, adequate. They can't be a liability with this style of attack. So I'm going to take the over 7.5 for the Oklahoma Sooners.
I'm going to take the under just slightly. I think 7 is really realistic. I think 8 would be a big success for this team just because of how brutal this schedule is, right? If they win all the games they're supposed to, lose the ones they probably should, it puts them right at that 7. So are they going to lose one, slip up somewhere, and steal one from somebody else? I just think they land right around 7, and that's respectable based on what they're missing, as you alluded to, and really how tough their schedule is.
Yeah, that schedule, it doesn't help at all. Another tough schedule. Greg, Georgia, over under 10.5 wins.
Well, I'm not taking the bait on this one. I think everybody and their brother thinks Georgia rolls out of bed, wins 11 or 12. And I think Vegas has the number here for a reason. So I'm going to go on the sharp side.
All right.
I'm going to take the under. I look at Georgia and I look at their personnel. I think they're amazing. I really do. I just think that schedule is an absolute gauntlet. And it really, this doesn't have as much to do about Georgia as it does the respect level I have for a road trip to Kentucky, a road trip to Bama, a road trip to Texas, a neutral site against Florida, who I think is going to be better than people realize, a road trip to Ole Miss, not to mention a high-flying attack like Tennessee. So I just look at the schedule, and I think there's 2 in there somewhere. I just don't know which 2 they might be.
So what you're telling me is I'm the sucker then, huh?
Well,
I'm
totally.
going to take the over.
That's fine. It's just Johnny Public.
You know what? I'm taking the over just because, like, I think Carson Beck, obviously I've said it before, is the best quarterback in the entire country.
Yeah.
I think their defense, especially at linebacker, returns 3 absolute studs at that level, and on the back end, a guy like Malachi Starks, who's here as well. So I think they slip up somewhere. I think they're going to, but I think they get to 11. And I think that it's, again, you mentioned the schedule is super tough. It's tough for all those other teams as well. Yeah. Everyone's going to be beat up this year, and Georgia just recruits so well. They're so deep. I think they roll.
They're deep and they're hungry, for sure. Now, Greg, Tennessee, over under 9.5 wins.
No, this one's tough for me because I look at their schedule, and I think that 10 is very achievable. I think 9 feels a little bit more right. So I'm going to take the under. I don't feel great about it at all. I think Tennessee is a top 10 team coming into the season. But I think when you look at just the sheer depth of college football right now, 9-3 is probably going to have you around 10, 11, or 12, depending on what conference you're in and just how challenging the gauntlet might be. I think the NC State game in Charlotte is a really challenging game. At Oklahoma is going to be one that the Sooners have had circled with Josh Heupel returning to Norman. I think the Alabama game is always a difficult game, and then you're at Georgia too. So I think there's a bunch of games that will be very, very challenging, but I'd lean under. I just don't. This is one of the hardest ones, I think, for me to get on board with.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'd lean under too. I think 9's a great number. If you look at the schedule, let's say they lose the ones they maybe should to Alabama and Georgia, then they got to run the table against everybody, and that includes at Oklahoma, at Arkansas, which is a tricky place to play toward the middle of the season as well. Kentucky, Florida on the schedule. I'm with you in Florida. So I just think 9's more realistic when you have a young quarterback, some pieces on defense that you're filling in with. But 9 would be a great season and put them, like you said, depend on some of those wins, right in contention for that 11-12 spot in the playoff.
Of course, all eyes also will be on Nico, and Coach Saban said earlier that they have an eccentric offense, so we shall see. All right, Greg, Missouri, over under 9.5 wins.
Yeah, I'm going to take the under on Missouri. I know we look at the schedule earlier. Let's look at how many times the ball seemingly bounced their way last year. And I look at 4 wins in 1-score games, 4-0. And those things have a very difficult time replicating themselves. Usually the ball bounces away from you the following year. And I hope that doesn't happen for Missouri, but I think it's certainly a realistic possibility. Now, I think the first 4 games are no problem. They should be okay in all 4 of those, including the neutral site, or excuse me, including the game against Boston College and the non-conference game against Buffalo and Murray State. I look at the road trip to A&M. I think that's a loss. I think the road trip to Alabama, I think that's probably going to be a loss as well. Then you factor in some of the others. Auburn at home, Oklahoma at home, at Mississippi State. After what you just traveled to South Carolina, now you got to go to Starkville. That's a really difficult place to play. So I just look at the schedule and I would take the under because I feel like the obvious thing would be to say 10-2. But man, I don't know. It just feels like they might get a little unlucky at some points this year. I
mean, if they were returning more on defense, I'd maybe think it was a better argument. I'm taking the under too. I think they get maybe to 9 wins. I think that's really realistic. But replacing your defensive coordinator, replacing pieces on defense, I think it makes it tough. And you're right. If it weren't for a 4th and 17 against Florida, they lose that game. Yeah. So there's some close games where you said it, the ball bounced their way. I just don't think this year in the SEC, you're going to win all of those games. So that means they might slip up somewhere else.
Yeah, we don't want to get caught up in that easy schedule because that can bite them in the bum. All right.
Give me something.